Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That handsome old man is Mike Tagliere, and it's you, and we're talking all things fantasy football today. And today's special episode is the preview of the AFC North fantasy style, and I'm very excited about the guest we have here. But Tags, before we bring in our guest, I know you've been a busy guy here these last few weeks, and you kind of mentioned to me before the show, you kind of feel like we're finally getting there. Like, we get sick of the draft talk until we get to the actual draft. We're kind of in that weird limbo, but now it's starting to feel like we're in draft season. And do you feel like you're starting to kind of turn the page? I feel like Scott Fishbowl is kind of like that thing that kicks everything off when you get that invite. Now, all of a sudden, you feel like it's time to go.
That's the unofficial start to the fantasy season. The Scott Fish Bowl typically starts right at the beginning of July. I think it's July 5th this year. So yeah, Scott, I just want to give a shout out to Scott. I mean, that guy, what he does for the industry, he's a rock star. I'm just happy to be a part of it. I'm happy he invites me to it. I'm happy to take part in it. And if you guys don't know what it is, what's he up to? Like, is it like 1,920 teams this year?
It's nuts.
It's like a giant fantasy football league where it's ridiculous, but all the money goes to charity, and he gets a bunch of kids' toys, and it's the greatest thing ever. So Scott, thank you for doing what you do, man.
Yeah, 100%. But it does feel like we're starting to get into that, and that's why we've got to start picking apart these divisions fantasy style. And if you missed any of these, I want to remind you, make sure you go over and subscribe to our YouTube page at Fantasy Pros, because we've got them all here where you can start to kind of get caught up. Maybe you're just getting back into football. You're not as much of a lunatic as some of us other people are, and you can kind of get caught up on all the offseason moves, what these teams are going to look like heading into the 2021 season. And I thought the perfect person to talk to for this is the person who did this exact division preview in the Fantasy Black Book. You, of course, know her as the co-founder of the BallBlast Fantasy Football podcast. You also know her as editorial coordinator of DraftKings Live, DK Live. She's the one, the only Kate Magdziuk. Kate, welcome to the show. It is good to see you, my friend.
Thank you guys for welcoming me so graciously to talk about, totally unbiasedly, my favorite division in football.
Yes, well, we know you bleed black and gold. That is very true. But I find this about Steeler fans, especially the really smart Steeler fans. Typically, they have a pretty good idea and self-awareness. You know, some other fan bases a little less so sometimes, but I feel like the Steeler fan, they know football, they know good, they know bad. I think there's every reason to be excited this year. Are you excited about these Steelers before we kind of start there with them?
I actually am. I know there's a lot of talk about the offensive line, Ben's elbow. We're hearing a lot of good things about Ben Roethlisberger and his zip 2 years post-elbow injury. Hopefully he's, got a little bit more of that under control and we can throw further than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. But honestly, more than anything, I'm just so excited to see Najee Harris on the field. I think this dude is, outside of football, a fantastic guy, a great leader, somebody that you really want to help rally your team. So I think he's fantastic across the board, but he's just such a fun player to watch. I know we're not supposed to be excited if somebody drafts a running back in the first round, but I was pretty excited for Najee.
Well, look, we're going to filter all that excitement in. We're going to kick things off with the Steelers in a second. But before we do, I want to remind everybody that you can get involved with us on Discord this year and get involved in some fantastic channels we're going to have there, some fantastic communities we're creating on Discord here at Fantasy Pros, and you can be involved with us, with Tags, with Dan, with Yates, myself. All of us are going to be in there doing these chats, doing these AMAs, doing these live interactive things. It's going to be super cool, but you got to join to be a part of it. So go to Discord, fantasypros.com/chat, join up on Discord. It's free to join, but the premium subscribers do have access to other things. Tags is going to do dances for everybody, private rooms and things like that. Sometimes he likes to do little touchdown dances. A lot of things you can only get when you're a subscriber. Yates is going to have DIY tips for you around the house. He's got a lot of things like that going on, so make sure you get involved there. And don't forget about our giveaway. Stephon Diggs jersey can be yours. Go to fantasypros.com/contest. It is autographed. It is glorious. All you got to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts or CastBox. Take a screenshot of that review. Head over to fantasypros.com/contest And all you got to do is enter that form, upload the screenshot, and a Stephon Diggs autographed jersey can be yours for free just for listening to the show. Thank you, Pristine Auction, for giving us free stuff to give to our friends. All right, Kate, let's kick things off here. You are our guest, Pittsburgh Steelers. You started teasing a little bit the excitement level of Najee Harris. I thought Tags is the most excited human about Najee. Let's see if you can match him. I'm right there with you guys. I feel like this is a dude that is going to hit the ground running, be there right away. And this was the missing piece in that offense. But with the offensive line still not making a gross improvement year over year, what's the chicken and the egg scenario here for you? Does Najee make the line better? Does the line hold back Najee? What do you think is going to happen here?
I'm actually, I'm kind of encouraged by the moves they made this offseason. So they did let Villanueva walk in.
Villanueva is not an easy name to say this early in the morning.
No.
Don't feel bad.
Yeah, I need a couple of more coffees and then I will be a perfect pronunciator. They let him walk in free agency, which everybody thought this was a really huge loss. But in 2020, he was one of the biggest liabilities on that offensive line. Allowed a lot of pressures. I think he was a big part of the problem, despite the fact that I really like him as a talent. I think he's a great leader. But he's now with the Bengals. They added in some interesting players. Let's talk about Pat Freiermuth, who I'm actually pretty excited about. Capable blocker. I do think that with the number of receivers they have on that line, I think they're going to use him as a blocker. I think it would only make sense for them to get him involved on the line. That's usually where we see these rookie tight end or make the biggest jump in year one, excuse me. And then let's look at Kendrick Green, who offensive lineman drafted in the 3rd round. Pretty excited about him. He's a pretty versatile player. He played left guard and center. There is definitely some room for him to grow, but PFF ranked him as the 7th most highly graded run blocker among all offensive linemen in the 2021 class. This guy's pretty underrated. He was under the radar, and I'm not sure if maybe some of those split snaps, not playing fully at guard, not playing fully at center, caused him to drop at all, but he's a very capable run blocker. So I think they are going to see some improvements, which only helps Najee. But I mean, I would be willing to bet a decent amount of money that Najee Harris walks away from the season with 300 touches minimum if he's healthy.
All right, now Tags, you're Mr. Najee Harris, so let's just kind of reiterate here. I know for me, what I was so excited about is when I watched this guy play in college, I just saw the complete running back. I saw the guy catch the football. I saw the guy that fought for extra yardage. I saw the guy that was physical when he needed to be out there in space. The speed is not a question. There's just really no questions there for me. So I guess the only question left is how good can he be and how aggressive should people be, in your opinion, in drafts when it comes to Najee Harris?
I mean, he could be great. Obviously, we like him as a running back. Volume's everything in terms of, running backs. And, we talk about it before. And there's a reason that people in the fantasy industry say running backs don't matter, which I think is crap in the grand scheme of things because they do matter. It's just not as much as some NFL coaches think they do. But when it comes to fantasy, you're just looking for opportunity. That's all you want. James Robinson was not particularly efficient last year, but everybody loved him because he had like 90% of the Jaguars' touches. You look at this backfield, Benny Snell, Jalen Samuels. Are we really worried about these guys? Anthony McFarland, a guy that legitimately they had injuries last year.
What about Kalen Ballage? Everybody loves Kalen Ballage.
Stop it. But no, I agree with Kate on this one that he's going to get 300 plus touches. In my initial set of projections, he came in as the RB7. Do I think I'm going to rank him there? It's really tough to do that because you've never seen him in the NFL. But at the same time, you look at the offense, you look at Roethlisberger, you try and factor how everything works together. And it's like, okay, if you have a running back that's getting 300 plus touches, he's almost by default an RB1. And when you take in Najee Harris's skill set and what he can do in the passing game, what he can do after contact, I do like Najee Harris. And I am going to rank him as a top 10 running back, hands down. The question is, how high am I willing to go? I think RB7, RB8 is where you should be willing to pull the trigger on him.
All right, so here's a question for you. I want to follow up, Tags. I know you're down on Jonathan Taylor, and you've stated your many, many reasons why.
I would take Najee Harris over Jonathan Taylor 9 times out of 9.
Would you take him over Nick Chubb, who is another running back we're going to talk about here?
That's the conversation where you get into where I have no issue if you want to take Chubb over him. I would take Chubb.
I have an issue taking Najee over Nick Chubb because Chubb I've seen for a couple years now be a dominant running back. And it's not a knock on Najee so much as I like seeing it. I like knowing what he is in the offense.
He's the one. He's that one where it's like, okay, he's probably the RB7, and I'll probably put Najee RB8. Aaron Jones comes down to Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers plays, I might put Aaron Jones over Najee Harris, but that's basically the cutoff. Like, I'm not going to take Austin Eckler over Najee Harris. I'm not going to take Edwards-Helaire. I'm not going to take Mixon. I'm not going to take Jonathan Taylor. I'm not going to take any of those guys over Najee Harris.
All right, let's get to the wide receivers here. Kate, you mentioned before, kind of in passing, let's just say it was underwhelming, the yards per target.
That's a word for it.
I'm trying to be nice. It's early. We've only had one coffee. I don't want to insult the Steeler Queen too much here this early in the morning. But it's true. It was underwhelming. Now, part of it was because everybody knew it was going on. So if Ben Roethlisberger is just dropping back and you can't run the football, you got to get rid of it very quickly because they're bringing extra help because, they know that Ben Roethlisberger is not exactly as mobile as he used to be. However, still, regardless of that, Deontay Johnson had a very good season in PPR. Juju Smith-Schuster, certainly decent enough. Did he live up to the expectations from a few years ago? Probably not. And then Chase Claypool had a few, I would say, big moments rather than saying a breakout season. I think he had some breakout games, but this is kind of a difficult trio because there are three guys that are very viable, but now you're adding the balance back into the offense. So how does that change your approach in fantasy to these wide receivers in what could be a more balanced Steelers attack?
See, I'm approaching all of these wide receivers pretty optimistically, and when I try to figure out which one of these guys I really want, it's probably just the last one available because I think they can all be equally productive. Deontay Johnson, obviously, he was an absolute target monster, ranked 6th in the NFL in targets, 144 targets, and we saw him miss some time on the field. Ended up with a concussion. He had a bunch of drops. All of these things were working against him in that season, and we still saw him with a monster workload. He was the wide receiver 6 in fantasy from weeks 9 to 17. The volume's just, you can't argue with the volume. I do think that Chase Claypool, he was certainly the most efficient wide receiver. If you're looking at just who was the best wide receiver on the field last season, it was Chase Claypool. If you're a believer that they are going to be targeted deeper down the field this season with another year under Ben's recovery, I do think that Chase Claypool could be the highest upside guy. You saw all of his touchdown potential. You saw him utilized, in interesting ways around the goal line. I think they overdid it a little bit, towards the second half of the season. Wasn't as effective then, but when you put Najee on the goal line and, Chase Claypool, and you can do some really fun things with this offense. But when Ben Roethlisberger has been healthy, his wide receivers have been top 4, in wide receiver points scored for an offense. It's really hard to argue with that. They're just so productive. The volume's always there. I think the play volume overall will be there. I just think this is going to be a productive offense like we saw when Lev Bell was under center. You saw all of that production in the passing game and in the rushing game. Mesh those together. This is a high-scoring offense, I think.
Tags, do you feel the same way that Najee actually, his presence could maybe benefit these guys because all of a sudden now you have to really account for him and what he's doing at all the time, getting more attention from the linebackers? That really opens up potentially the middle of the field for Juju maybe to rebound into a higher level again. He came back to the Steelers this offseason. What are your thoughts on this wide receiving core, Tags?
It could be a situation where the receivers have more one-on-one situations because Najee demands more people to go in the box, but at the same time, he's going to take away some of that touchdown upside. He's going to take away some of the targets in the passing game. That affects the tight ends more than anything, but the wide receivers, they're going to be targeted. Roethlisberger's always thrown to those guys, but when you start breaking this down, Deontay Johnson's the most talented wide receiver on this team. He's the most talented. He's the route runner. He had to get the drops under control. He seemed to get that over the second half of last year, and it really popped off. Roethlisberger trusts him. Juju Smith-Schuster is not going away. He may never live up to the hype that we thought he was going to when Antonio Brown was on the team, game, but he is a guy that Roethlisberger trusts. He's a guy that's going to see 120 targets. That's just going to happen as long as he's on the field. So Chase Claypool is kind of the odd man out for me. It doesn't mean he's not talented, but it's more like, does his skill set align with Ben Roethlisberger and what he's able to do at this point in his career? You would think that Roethlisberger, getting further and further away from that shoulder surgery would have been that he would have gotten better as the year went on, but in reality, he got worse. And if you watched him over the second half of last year, he looked like a quarterback that was done. And then he started checking down more and more. He didn't take a whole lot of sacks, so people want to be like, well, is the offensive line really that bad? It was really Ben seemed to be scared to get hit, which was never really something he did. So Roethlisberger needs to bounce back in order for any of these guys to justify drafting them as anything more than a wide receiver 3. But really, for me, Claypool, the stat I want to throw out there in him is that he finished as the wide receiver 19 last year. He's being drafted right now as the wide receiver 26. I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because he finished as a wide receiver 3 or better 50% of the time. That was tied for 34th among wide receivers with Jamison Crowder and Devontae Parker. Those were 2 receivers that you could never really trust in your lineup. He finished with fewer than 60 yards in 11 of 16 games. Chase Claypool was very much touchdown reliant.
Yeah.
Can he score those touchdowns? Yes. And I agree with Kate, the fact that he might be the highest upside wide receiver just because he has the ability to take the top off the defense. He probably has double-digit touchdown upside. Deontay Johnson hasn't really shown that yet. So I think, yes, maybe that's the case, but I cannot justify drafting him as a borderline wide receiver 2. Because, again, wide receiver 26, that's a borderline wide receiver 2. I feel better with him in like that. If you want to take him as a tail end wide receiver 3 and say, I'm okay dealing with the ups and downs. But he's Deontay Johnson's the one that I think you could rely on week in, week out.
Yeah, Deontay was my guy last year. I had every single share. I swear to God. Like, every single league I was in, I had Deontay Johnson, CeeDee Lamb. And look, the drops, when you have more targets than anybody else in football, you're going to have more drops too. But what was good is you saw Deontay Johnson not fold. He didn't fold up the tents when he had the drops. Roethlisberger would get in his ear or whatever it was, and he'd go back out there and he would catch balls in the second half and came back. And look, it was a disappointing end to the season for them, and I think there's a little renewed energy there for this organization with the young kid too. Before we get to the Baltimore Ravens, I want to take a minute and just tell you, look, summertime is here, okay? And I know you're all out there, you're going to the beach, you're going to the pool, you got your $5 pair of sunglasses, and I'm like you, I used to do that. The $5 pair, the $15 pair, because you got kids and they step on things, they put things in bags, they step on stuff. It's a disaster. But you got to get yourself a pair of these. These are the rain sunglasses, and I've been known to make it rain here on the podcast. And I know what you're saying. It's hard to make Joey P look cooler than he already is, but the rain sunglasses do that, and this is why you watch us on the YouTube channel on Fantasy Pros, so you get this sort of imagery along with these reads. But I'm telling you, these are the nicest pair of sunglasses I have ever gotten. Tags can't have them because they don't make prescription kind yet, so I have them. Tags does not. He is jealous of me. But I'm telling you right now, they are fantastic. They are founded in 2009 by 3 California guys who are frustrated with the lack of quality, accessible eyewear. And it's true. You buy cheap sunglasses and they're disposable. Why not make an investment on a good pair you have every year and it pays for themselves? Look, the lenses are manufactured by world-renowned Carl Zeiss Vision. Everybody likes the Carl Zeiss Vision. They're the fantastic quality material that you're looking for in your sunglasses. Plus, they maintain the shiny new look, which is nice. I've had these now for a few months, and they're still shiny. They still look good. They don't take the scratches. That's what you want. And look, celebrities out there like James Harden, Shay Mitchell, Rihanna, John Hamm, Joe Pisapia, all wear them. So what you want to do right now is you want to go over, why is that funny? I don't understand. So look no further than Rain. Again, for our Fantasy Pros football listeners, head to raen.com. Again, that's rain.com, raen.com. Use that promo code FantasyPros. Receive 25% off your first order. Again, that's rain, raen.com. And use that promo code FantasyPros for 25% off your order and look cool like me and John Hamm. So let's get to the Baltimore Ravens here. It's kind of stunning here to me about the Ravens when we start here, Kate, is I feel like, we went from Lamar Jackson being, how early do we want to take him, to now he's almost falling to a point where he's almost a bargain. And even in single quarterback leagues, I kind of look at this and say, did everybody watch the second half? I mean, I understand they were very predictable early on. 2 years ago, everybody said, well, the Baltimore Ravens are doing something we haven't seen, this whole new offense, and they're built around Lamar. And then people kind of figured it out. They started game planning. And then in the second half of last year, the Ravens started to make some adjustments. It got a little less predictable. But Lamar, I feel like the value hasn't bounced back. Are you kind of seeing that same thing where he's being maybe slightly undervalued this year in 2021 as opposed to last year maybe he was overvalued?
I think I'm really sort of caught in between here because I've seen him go anywhere from the quarterback 5 in mocks all the way down to like quarterback 10. It's really, I think, dependent on your league and what, your teammates, what your league mates are thinking about Lamar Jackson. The thing that concerns me about Lamar Jackson is not the upside, obviously. We know the upside. It's quarterback 1. But my concern does lie with the fact that we saw, a pretty still efficient season, not as efficient as we saw in 2019, but 6.9% touchdown rate for Lamar Jackson. That's fantastic. Had a 64% completion percent, slightly more interceptions, but I mean, overall, he had a pretty similar season. There was just, a little less volume. It was just, he came back down to earth and we saw he finished as the quarterback 11. So it's, I worry that if we are going to draft him as a top 5 quarterback, you're going to have to use a lot of that early draft capital where you could be getting a guy, one of your RB2, an RB2, a wide receiver 2. But you have to walk away with Lamar Jackson, and it's all about, chasing that upside versus the floor. We know what Lamar Jackson is, but we also know what the offense is. I know we've also talked about them increasing the volume in the passing game. I was looking up Greg Roman's stats today, and I am actually floored. So Greg Roman, as an offensive coordinator, his offense has never ranked higher than 29th in the NFL for pass attempts. In all of his years as OC, never higher than 29th. Rushing offense, he has always been a top 9 offense, and most of that time it was top 3. He's a predictable coach. I think even if we see any sort of increase in the passing volume, we are going to probably expect that, they're run first. They're going to get J.K. Dobbins involved, Gus Edwards. They're going to spread the ball around, but I'm just not sure that I see the ceiling as reliable as maybe it's worth it.
Now, Tags, after week 12, Jackson had 80 or more rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games. So it seemed like, for whatever reason, maybe it was protecting him, maybe it was trying to make the offense something it wasn't early on. It seemed like they kind of took the reins off Lamar Jackson as the season went on there, and all of a sudden he looked much like the MVP from the year before. What's your take on Lamar and where he's going in drafts right now, in your opinion, in terms of ADP and ECR, and also what you think he could be doing this year in 2021 in terms of, is he a value, is he not at that current spot?
Lamar Jackson should be in the conversation for QB1. I'm just gonna say no. So he started 2 years now. Patrick Mahomes. I just pull up the numbers. So I do the series every year. It's called Boom Bust and everything in between. I go through and I walk through the consistency of every player. Talk about the upside. Talk about the mediocrity. If you just need a player that's going to give you a floor, all that stuff, right? Lamar Jackson, since he became the starter, 2 years now. So it's a decent sample size. He has posted QB1 type numbers 77% of the time. Patrick Mahomes' career 69.6%. No other quarterback right now is over 64%. So you start talking about that. Lamar Jackson's giving you that. He's giving you a ceiling. Over the last 2 years, there's only been 2 games where he's scored fewer than 14 fantasy points, which is what I consider a complete bust. So he has a high floor too. Lamar Jackson. So I love that we're talking about the offense, but Greg Roman and Kate, you make a great point about it. And it's the same point that I made last year when it came to the Bills offense. Brian Daboll, he was someone that never... I just pulled it up just so I can reference it. His offense never finished higher than 24th in pass attempts. And it was the reason that I dialed back expectations on Stephon Diggs last year. And I made a grave mistake. There's no other way to say it. Stephon Diggs, obviously when Stephon Diggs comes to your offense, you change the way that the offense is run. They've made a clear emphasis on adding pass catchers this year. They've added a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. So it's like, all right, this offense is going to change. The question is how much it can change, right? I don't know if you really want to take away from the bread and butter, which is their ground game. So I did increase Lamar Jackson's pass attempts, but if you look at the Bills last year, in 2019, they threw the ball 499 times or 513 times, something like that. Last year, that number went all the way up to 593. So it's like if you get 100 80 to 100 pass attempt increase, he would still be towards the bottom of the league, but at the same time, it would be a healthy increase. I don't even know if I want that for his fantasy value, though. He's been a better passer than I think most people have anticipated, but this really comes down to our offensive coordinators trying to take away from what the Bills did. And it's like, if you bring in a talent like that, the same thing with the Tennessee Titans. Julio Jones comes to your team. When Julio Jones comes to your team, you throw the ball more.
Right, you change, right.
It's the bottom line. Now, the problem with the Ravens that we can't say that specifically is because Sammy Watkins hasn't been a great player as of late. Rashod Bateman is a rookie. As much as I love him, he's still a rookie, and we haven't seen him produce in the NFL. Marquise Brown, they don't really have that go-to guy. They don't have Julio Jones. If Julio Jones had gone to the Ravens, I'd be 100% confident they're throwing the ball more. I do think the Ravens are throwing the ball. It's just the question is how much, and how much does that change?
Well, I think the question then, Tags, becomes, is it a fantasy investment, that passing game? That's the question, because Marquise Brown's still there, Mark Andrews there. You kind of know what they are at this point. They brought in Sammy Watkins, but you mentioned Rashod Bateman, who you and I have thrown the comps of the Keenan Allen to, Devin Duvernay, who I know Yates just talked about on our last podcast together. Do you think those guys are fantasy investments, especially Bateman, who I think could be very exciting? And Lamar was a better, thrower of the football than people realize in college.
Well, I'm going to take Bateman out of this group. So Marquise Brown, this move was great for the Ravens to sign Bateman because Marquise Brown was miscast from the moment that he was drafted. He's never going to be an alpha. He never should have been an alpha. Right. He should have been a field stretcher. He can do a little bit more than that, but really he's a guy that your quarterback can scramble. He could buy time. Marquise Brown, DBs just can't hang with him for that long. He never should have been that go-to receiver. So I think this is good for a football standpoint. I don't see Marquise Brown getting anywhere close to the targets he needs to in order to be a difference maker in fantasy. He's going to have certain weeks, sure. But Rashod Bateman's the one. He reminded me a lot. And it was legitimately right at the beginning of the draft cycle back in January or February. I said, this dude reminds me of Keenan Allen, while I'm watching Rashod Bateman. And I think that's someone that we've watched Lamar Jackson kind of treat Mark Andrews as a safety blanket, but Mark Andrews hasn't always been on the field. He's splitting snaps. It's kind of weird with Mark Andrews in terms of what he does and what he doesn't, what he's been able to accomplish and how often he's not on the field. But Rashod Bateman's going to be on the field all the time. I think Bateman's the guy because you're going to find out week one. You're going to find out his role. You're going to find out how many targets. You're going to find out if his team's throwing more. You're going to find out a lot. And then again, right now he's wide receiver 62 in ADP.
It's free to find out.
Exactly. and then you're going to find out right away, and it says, hey, if I don't have anything, I'm free to cut him and move on.
Kate, what about the running back situation here? We know Lamar runs so much, but it has been a very run-heavy attack, as we've mentioned. J.K. Dobbins had a fantastic finish to the season, scored a bunch of touchdowns, had those breakaway runs, which you can argue, he kind of needs those kind of moments in order to be that solid RB2. Right now, he's being drafted as such somewhere in that, mid to high end RB2 conversation, depending on the draft. Gus Edwards still there too, doing his work. Gus Edwards is one of those guys, one of the more, I would think, capable backups. He does get his touches as well. Deeper leagues, he's probably somebody worth stashing on the bench. What's your take on J.K. Dobbins this year? Is this a running back that you want in on, or is this running back you're afraid of because of maybe the combination of Lamar running the football and all of a sudden throwing more? Does it limit Dobbins potentially?
J.K. Dobbins, especially for his current ADP, is one of my least favorite players to draft in the second round. I love the talent. I love the upside. He's a guy that I love to grab in best ball leagues. Underdog fantasy, give me J.K. Dobbins all day long. But the issue for me is that he got all of that production on a lot of efficiency last season. I'm not, similarly to how we projected a decrease in efficiency for Lamar Jackson, I projected decrease in efficiency for J.K. Dobbins. Does Lamar under center and that rushing ability help the overall efficiency of the other rushers within the offense? Absolutely. But his lack of usage in the receiving game, his overall, even outside of his 6 yards per carry, had 9 rushing touchdowns last season, but just 8 carries inside of the 5. 7 of those were touchdowns. That's just off the charts. So efficient. And then you look at Gus Edwards. I mean, he didn't shine quite as bright, but did see 144 carries in the 2020 season. Just got a decent extension, for a quote unquote backup running back. But I mean, it definitely comes down to the receiving work. He never had more than 4 targets in a single game had 2 or fewer targets in 12 of 15 games. Yikes. Like that that's not something that I'm excited for in terms of PPR upside. Now you've given Lamar Jackson a few more weapons that I don't think this offense is necessarily built to funnel the ball to one specific pass catcher. So adding more guys into the picture, especially Rashod Bateman, who's super capable, right in the middle of the field where like Lamar Jackson makes his most magic. I'm not seeing the ceiling increase. I'm seeing the efficiency decrease. At the price, I'm out.
Yeah. All right. Make sure you stick around to the end of the show, too. We're going to give you our sleepers and our busts and our breakouts from this division. Maybe, spoiler alert, how Kate might be feeling about one of these guys. Let's move on to the Cleveland Browns here. And the identity of the Cleveland Browns did change and evolve. And I think offensively it's something to take note of, especially when it comes to Baker Mayfield. Towards the end of the season there, if he could just kind of pick up where he left off, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks over his last 8 games. That's the more efficient Baker Mayfield you want to see. It was a Baker Mayfield that was running a lot more off of play action because Nick Chubb was so dominant towards the end of the season when he came back from the injury. And you saw when you give Baker Mayfield that single look to look for, where he's targeting that guy off of that play action, he's very efficient with the football. Bad Baker Mayfield's the guy who's throwing the ball where there's 1 receiver and 3 defensive backs in the same area. You can get away with that in college. You can't get away with that in the NFL. All of a sudden you started to see the Browns sort of galvanize around what they had here after Odell Beckham was hurt and not part of the offense. So, Tags, did you see, like I did, kind of a better version of Baker Mayfield? And what does that mean to the offense as a whole? Is this something they're going to continue to build off of, or is this maybe a little bit of a flash in the pan for you?
No, it's just getting a grip on the offense. It's almost like go back to Jay Cutler and the fact that, in the beginning of his career, he had Shanahan as his coach, Kyle Shanahan, or Mike Shanahan, Kyle. Mike Shanahan.
It's a lot of Shanahans, but in all fairness. Like every 2 days, there's a new Shanahan in the NFL somewhere.
No, but from that point forward, it was almost like he had no stability at coordinator, and it's learning a new offense every single year gets old. So it was good to see Baker kind of get a grip, and Stefanski's not going anywhere, especially after he just won Coach of the Year. So this offense is going to keep going. They got better, and I think part of it was due to the fact that Baker stopped forcing the ball to Odell.
Right.
People talk about, is Baker better without Odell? No, he's not better. No team is better without Odell Beckham Jr. The question is, does it change the way you approach the game? And I think Baker learned a valuable lesson, is that he needs to stop forcing the ball to receivers. We saw towards the end of the year, Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry were weekly top 30 plays, and it was because Baker let the game come to him. He didn't force anything. The run game is going to open that up. Play action is going to open that up. I do believe that this team is still going to be centered around the run. It's clear. But I do want to say that Nick Chubb, what he accomplished last year was stupid. If there's anybody in this league that I can project for 5 yards per carry, it's him. I don't want to do it because it's like unrealistic to expect someone to run for 5 yards per carry every single season. Jamal Charles was one of those running backs, but looking at it, I talk about a lot about our opportunity, and this article is not coming out till next month, but I've already started the research and I just wanted to share this with you guys. Running backs typically, in terms of opportunity, where their carries take place in the field. I've talked about this before, where if you get a carry on the 50-yard line, it's not worth as much as one on the 25-yard line. That's not worth as much as one on the 10 and the 5. Nick Chubb, in terms of where his carries, where his targets took place and all that, he was expected to finish as the 24th running back. He finished number 9. That's a 15-spot difference. There is no one else even remotely close. Like, you'll see running backs -3, -4, +3, +4. Like, a lot of the time, Todd Gurley was -10. It goes to show you just how ridiculous Nick Chubb was last year, and how it can't happen like that again. Now, granted, he did miss 4 games in there, so if you add on a per game sample, he probably would have been much higher up there. But it's almost like a J.K. Dobbins thing, Kate, where you were talking about Dobbins and his lack of involvement in the passing game. Love J.K. Dobbins. He's another one of those running backs where it's like, I could see him running for 5 yards per carry. I know it's 6 last year, but if you look at the numbers side by side with Derrick Henry, they were like the exact same in terms of what they caught and what they finished with in the receiving department. And it's like, okay, you guys can talk all you want about J.K. Dobbins getting more work in the passing game. That doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. We've heard the same thing with Josh Jacobs. So that's where basically Nick Chubb, that's where the limitations come in. Nick Chubb is a very, very safe running back at the end of the first round. But unless there's an injury to Kareem Hunt, I don't see a path to him getting to be the RB1 in fantasy football.
Kate, what are your thoughts on Chubb? Because I have him ranked higher than most other people do, because of that safe factor, because I know exactly what his role in the offense. I know he excels in that role. And even in the second half when he came back, Kareem Hunt was still involved, but Kareem Hunt was more involved in the first part of the season than he was in the latter part of the season of that offense. I think we can all agree on that. We saw Nick Chubb really sort of be that dominant guy. Is he equally safe for you in that mid to low first round range when you're looking at Nick Chubb, despite the fact that, Kareem Hunt is still very viable and is going to eat up some of that passing work?
I mean, I think this is like the best 1-2 punch in the NFL when it comes to running back duos. They both finished inside the top 10 for fantasy points scored. And I mean, Nick Chubb, as you mentioned, was injured last season, missed 4 games. So I do love Nick Chubb. I love the opportunity. I think this offense is going to continue to score points, especially with Kevin Stefanski returning. We saw a huge jump from Baker Mayfield in, his first season alone with Kevin Stefanski, but this is going to be the first season he has a same coaching staff with him, which is crazy. So that's going to be good for the offense in general, but I think both of these running backs could be super productive. But for ADP, do I think Nick Chubb is safer? Absolutely. But for their ADP and given price tag, I think Kareem Hunt's the better value because they both have that upside. We've seen Kareem Hunt literally finish as the top 5 running back. We know he's capable of handling a big workload. We know he's capable as a receiver. I'm going to take Kareem Hunt just because I can get him a couple rounds later, and he has pretty, he doesn't have as safe a floor, but I think he has a really similar upside.
Well, if you recall tags last year in the Fantasy Pros, we did that bold prediction show where I said they would both finish as RB1s in PPR. Well, gosh darn it, look at that. Well, pretty darn good, right? It just made it. Just snuck in there.
Yeah.
Just snuck in there. Really. But that was with the injury to Chubb. Chubb did have that injury.
Hunt was not good when Chubb was out of the lineup, by the way. He's better in that timeshare role.
And that is another great point, too. And I'll make one more point. I'm going to throw this out there. If you're playing in auction formats, and you don't want to spend Derrick Henry dollars, spend Nick Chubb dollars, because what Tags is talking about, you can get him at a little bit of that discount, and you might get kind of like that 85% version, 90% version of Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's in a different planet, but if you're in the auction, what you're always looking to do is find that, who's that, maybe not the store brand guy, but whatever that next level down is, because
Nick Chubb is somehow the discounted version of Jonathan Taylor now, and I don't know why the hell that happened.
Well, that's absurd. That's a whole other show. We don't have time for that conversation. Let's talk about the receivers here. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, the People's Champion. Kate, any interest in these guys at their current values?
I'm not really too in on the receivers. I think what they're going to continue to focus on is the run game. I think that's going to be the most consistent part of this offense. Do I think that, there's a possibility that we see a bounce back from Jarvis Landry? Yes, absolutely. Odell Beckham remains to be seen. They've got, some capable tight ends there as well. I just think there's so much dilution among the receiving core there. And I think there's too much rushing volume to go around. I'm not trusting any of these wide receivers. I'm not trusting Baker Mayfield as a fantasy quarterback. Even when he took that jump, he still hasn't finished higher than the quarterback 20 in fantasy. I don't think the passing volume's there. I'm gonna skip on any receivers in Cleveland, even though I think we might have some good weeks outside of best ball formats. I'm out.
All right, let's recognize one of our sponsors before we go on to the Cincinnati Bengals, because I know we're excited to talk about them. It's Pristine Auction, and we're excited to talk about Pristine Auction all the time here. I'll tell you, they have just the best stuff in terms of your sports memorabilia, your autographed baseballs, your autographed helmets, really cool things. Everything there is authentic, so everything you buy there, purchase there, comes with that certification of authenticity. Things are more affordable than you think. Yeah, there's stuff for thousands of dollars, but also stuff there for $50 or $25. It's pretty cool that you can put on your desk at work. You can get things for your man cave, for your woman cave. Look, whatever you got. Maybe you got a little bar downstairs in the basement where everybody comes over to watch football. you can get some really cool stuff there, Pristine Auction. So what you want to do there is go sign up for free. It's free to bid. It's free to register. And you only pay for stuff when you win. So you go to pristineauction.com. Again, that's PRISTINE.com. Everyone's testing my spelling today here with these reads. I just want you to know. And what you do is you use the code FantasyPros, that's all one word, FantasyPros, when you register, and you get $5 on us free. Take the $5, go get yourself something nice, just like when you used to visit your grandma, and she'd stick that in your hand and say, go ahead, go get yourself something at the store or something. You know, the Italian grandmas, they always gave you 20. I don't know what the other grandmas do, but Italian grandmas, it's like they shake your hand like you're the maitre d' of a restaurant, and they put money in your hand. I don't know why they do this. It's just something they do. And we're like your Italian grandma. We want you to go get yourself something nice at Pristine Auction. So go do that today. Again, that's pristineauction.com. Let's get to the Bengals. Ooh, I'm excited for the Bengals, boys and girls, because good offense, bad defense. That makes Joey a happy boy. I like this a lot. Joe Burrow had some really good moments last year. I started to get very excited before that knee injury, and it was, crushing, so sad. Tags, I know you had very high expectations for Burrow. You and I had many discussions about, can he crack that quarterback one conversation last year? He's starting to look like he might be able to do it. Can he do it this year with the group of quarterbacks that are so top heavy? Can he backdoor in there and get to like 10, 11, 12, you think?
Yeah, I think that's the territory that I think you're looking for with him, because coming off the ACL, it's one of those things that I worry about with Prescott a little bit too, where these guys, in order to get into that top 5 conversation, you almost need to have mobility. You need to be able to score a handful of rushing touchdowns, have maybe 400 yards rushing in order to even get in that conversation. Because again, going back to Brady, the guy threw for 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns, and he finishes the number 7 or number 8 quarterback. So Burrow, coming off the ACL injury, I don't know if that's going to limit his mobility. That's the biggest concern I have for him. But it goes back to the Jameis Winston conversation back with Tampa, when the defense was so bad that he was just putting up those pass attempts, and he has the receivers to support it, right? You add Jamar Chase, a guy that he's going to have instant chemistry with. T. Higgins proved that he was like a wide receiver 1 when Joe Burrow was in the lineup. Tyler Boyd is a reliable presence over the middle of the field. Drew Sample was not good. CJ Uzomah is coming back, which again, it's just a more stable, I guess, tight end than Drew Sample was last year. Mixon should be utilized in the passing game, but he's not, for whatever reason. But Joe Burrow, if you want to draft him around that QB 10 to QB 12 range, I have zero issue with that. But I just want you to know that it's probably, I would say that QB 7, QB 8 is probably the best case scenario for him. So just understand that there's probably some quarterbacks down the board a little bit more that you might be able to have some more equity in. For me right now, if I grab Burrow, I'm probably going to grab another quarterback just to say, hey, in case it doesn't work out, I have an alternate plan.
Right, and you can afford to do that because Burrow's, in the single quarterback leagues going somewhere around like QB 15-ish, somewhere in that range. So you have opportunity there to make that work. Kate, what are your thoughts on Joe Burrow and this wide receiving core? Everybody's very excited about Jamar Chase. I was super excited about T. Higgins until Chase showed up. Should we still be equally excited about both these guys? And has Tyler Boyd become the forgotten man? Is there anything left for Tyler Boyd? He's still hungry. Give this man some targets. What do you think about these guys?
I think all of these guys have equal opportunity. I'm very excited for this offense in general. I think they're going to be very productive. Joe Burrow was on pace for 646 pass attempts in his rookie season. That's buku volume. He threw the ball a lot. I mean, that's what you want, right? That's what you want for your wide receivers is buku volume. They don't have any tight end that I, project for, to dominate in terms of a target share. But I mean, AJ Green, despite the fact that he was just god awful last season, if he had even close to like his average career numbers ish, in terms of catch rate and yards per target, he would have had 44 catches for 639 receiving yards instead of. Oh yeah, and
he got plenty
He had
of targets.
essentially like 2 catches for 6 yards.
AJ Green was getting 10 targets a game. It felt like in the first 4 weeks of the season, he just couldn't haul in any of them.
It was crazy. Talk about a downfall, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I mean, Joe Burrow, we've seen what he's able to do when he has capable weapons around him. Now he gets his favorite weapon of all back, T. Higgins. You got to love his monstrous size. You have to love his talent. And I mean, Tyler Boyd, he's like one of the most underrated receivers in the league. I think this triple threat here is going to be very dangerous for fantasy. And I think you could trust them all. Again, for in terms of who do I want to draft in this offense, I'll take whoever's cheapest, whoever falls to me. It's probably Tyler Boyd, because I think they are going to have close to similar volume.
All right, let's talk about Joe Mixon, Kate, for a second, because right now in expert consensus rankings, the ECR and Fantasy Pros, he is RB12. So he's right there, that last guy in terms of RB1s, 20 overall. Is he appropriately valued, in your opinion, coming off the injury? And I understand the injury's a concern, but at the same time, you have to realize when you make an investment on a player and there's nothing to play for, there's no reason to push that player back from injury sooner. Are you concerned with Mixon? Is this appropriate? Is it a value? How do you look at Joe Mixon in 21?
I am concerned about Joe Mixon, but you know what? I don't think I'm the best person to ask. I've never been a Joe Mixon fan. But, it's really hard to argue with the fact that he probably is going to touch the ball 300 times. My issue with Joe Mixon is that I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that in any sort of efficient manner. Last season just had one game with over 4 yards per attempt, one game with over 3.6 yards per attempt. He got the bulk of his efficiency through one game, and that was against Jacksonville, who had a terrible rushing defense. I mean, again, volume is sort of the key word for Mixon for me. And outside of volume, I'm not buying in. I think he's a player that has, a relatively safe floor because of that touch volume, but I don't see the upside there. I feel like there are so many other running backs in a similar range that have potential to finish, in that top 10 with higher upside than Joe Mixon does.
Tags, Kate just mentioned the 300 potential carries there. Or touches, I should say. Do you think that Joe Mixon is worthy of a selection this year, coming off this injury, where he's going at RB12? I know I'm not going to ask you about Najee Harris or him. I know the answer to that. But Cam Akers or him, Tags, we're right there back to back, RB11, RB12. What are your thoughts?
I'd take Mixon in that scenario. Sean McVay said at the beginning of last year he wanted to model his backfield after Kyle Shanahan, and that's always a worrisome thing. But Cam Akers has RB1 potential. He actually the RB1 potential, because if that offense takes off under Stafford and he gets those 20 touches per game, he has that potential. Mixon, we know he's getting the volume. It's just a matter of staying on the field. And I think that's one of those things that we haven't really talked about on the show that we really should now that we're talking about the Bengals. I think you kind of have to downgrade Bengals players as a whole, because this team, this medical staff in particular, has been crappy. I don't know how else to put it. Go back to A.J. Green in 2019, and then you look at Joe Mixon in 2020. They have not told us the truth about anything. So if you hear about an injury with a Bengals player, you need to take worst case scenario. Even if they tell you the player's going to be back in a couple weeks, it's a bunch of crap. Mixon is still one of the most talented running backs in the league. Again, Zach Taylor, this is now, year 3 under Zach Taylor? We haven't seen him utilized as a pass catcher the way he should be. The only time we really did was when Giovanni Bernard was out of the lineup last year. It's obviously a good thing to know that Giovanni Bernard is gone now. Do they bring in Chris Evans? Do they have Travion Williams come onto the field? I can't see an NFL coach doing that, but is it possible? Yeah. It's just one of those situations where if you have a running back that's going to get 300 touches, you have an offense that is going to score some points with Joe Burrow and these trio of wide receivers, it's I want a part of that. So if you want Mixon as a low-end RB1, I'm cool with that.
All right, let's head to the lightning round, the sleepers, busts, and breakouts from the division. I'll start off with my sleeper, and it's Rashod Higgins. You heard Tags drop this and then run away and keep talking, but Higgins, when Odell Beckham wasn't on the field, is a favorite target of Baker Mayfield. He feels very comfortable with him. Also, Odell Beckham, last 4 years, games played, 4, 12, 16, and 7. So as good as Odell Beckham is in terms of talent, let's not forget he misses time. Higgins right now is wide receiver 94 in ECR, and that's a free square, a guy in deeper leagues that I think might see more playing time potentially this year than you might imagine. Kate, who is your sleeper going into this year?
I'm gonna take a cop out here because I haven't been able to find a sleeper.
No
in the AFC
sleepers
North.
From the AFC North, and it's either
nobody
all or nothing
that I buy
here, right?
into. So you know what? I could name names just to name names. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to put my stake in somebody I don't believe in necessarily. I would say the closest I can get to a true sleeper here is Ben Roethlisberger, because he is being drafted incredibly low because of his injury, because of the low ADOT. I do think that we're going to see an increase in all those metrics. And overall, this team has been very pass heavy overall. Ranked top 10 in pass attempts every season but last season since the 2016. I just think there's going to be lots of opportunity here. Is it going to be as efficient? Perhaps not. But we still have plenty of QB1 potential. And I mean, arguably one of the best wide receiver trios in the league, partnered with one of the best running backs in the league. I think Ben could be like bounce back of the year candidate in this season to come, but it's really hard because this entire division is filled with studs.
It's a little high-low. Yeah, it's a little high-low. How about for you, Tags? Is there a sleeper for you that you could kind of carve out?
It's Rashod Bateman. You think back to last year with Brandon Ayuk. He was a guy that no one was drafting, and it was like, oh, this guy might be the number one wide receiver on his team, especially with Debo dealing with that foot issue that he was dealing with. And it was kind of like, okay, but nobody really wants the 49ers receivers, do we? But so Rashod Bateman is a guy that it's like, I believe in the talent. And if we do get an increase in the pass attempts similar to what the Bills had last year, I do believe he's the biggest beneficiary of that. So I'll go Rashod Bateman.
All right, who's your bust then, if that's your sleeper?
Chase Claypool. Just again, it comes back to him being the, I think it comes back to him being the fourth option on this team in terms of like the pecking order. And it's not to say that he's not going to have more targets than Najee Harris, but it's more like how I envision the consistency of it going. Because Najee's going to get a consistent flow of targets, let's say at 4 or 5 per game, whereas Claypool is going to be all over the board. Deontay Johnson's getting targeted. That's happening. Juju Smith-Schuster not going away. I know his efficiency has tumbled down the last couple of years, but still he's a favorite of Roethlisberger. Claypool, apparently the coaching staff had some issues with him towards the end of last year, and it came out that that's part of the reason that his snaps started dipping a little bit, because he was a little too worried about his image or something like that. It came out that the coaching staff was basically just saying they were trying to get ahead of the issue and basically not let his head get too big and worry about his image, more worry about the team. So, but again, this really comes back and this isn't a long-term thing with Claypool, because again, he probably has massive upside if they do get a quarterback, but I think it's just about where Roethlisberger is at in his career. Ben has been so good for a long time. He was underrated for a long time. But at the same time, it's like when that arm goes, it just goes. And he looked like a quarterback that should have been retiring over the second half of last year. Will his arm bounce back? Kate is optimistic. I just need to see it before I start believing it.
Yeah, understandably so. Now, Kate, I know your heart broke a little bit there where you said Chase Claypool. So give me your bust in this division, the AFC North.
All right, you teased it a little bit earlier. It's J.K. Dobbins. We talked about the lack of receiving work. We talked about the projection for a decrease in efficiency. I think the ceiling is very high for J.K. Dobbins. I think he is going to win people plenty of weeks, but I do think that there's going to be some inconsistencies there where, the lack of efficiency isn't enough to make up for, a decreased volume if we see, a shift in the overall metrics of this team. If they do decide to pass more, just too many moving pieces of the puzzle, and I'm out on J.K. Dobbins.
All right, for me, I am out on Mark Andrews. And I know people are going to say, why are you out on Mark Andrews? Well, it's because I do like Bateman. It's because I feel like they got a little bit predictable, and also I am on it's Travis Kelce, Darren Waller for me, or I'm just going to wait to the end. I like the ADP wide receivers, running backs in that same range as Andrews too much to go for the tight end there that to me is a fantasy league average tight end. And I think there's some guys out there that could finish in that same range potentially later on. So it's not a knock on Andrews. It's just a knock on where he's going in terms of value. Breakout. Look, I know it's going to sound kind of corny here. You could go with Jamar Chase. You could go with Najee Harris. I'm going to go with Najee Harris. He's that damn good. I know Tags is going to be Najee Harris. I don't even have to ask him, I'm pretty sure. Although I'm sure Jamar Chase was probably a close second for you. But, Kate, who is your breakout?
You almost, so I literally had to force myself to pivot away from Najee. We almost had a consensus AFC
and that's
North
a good
breakout.
thing. A consensus
it is
breakout's
a great
thing for everybody.
Yep.
It is a great thing, but I will say I pivoted on purpose because I think Joe Burrow is not getting enough love for what ceiling we could be seeing in the 2021 season. I said it earlier, he was on pace for 646 pass attempts in his rookie season in those 11 games he played. We saw him produce Tyler Boyd as the wide receiver 11, T. Higgins, wide receiver 26. all of these guys, even AJ Green, saw between 70 and 86 targets. That's beautiful. You have very capable receivers here. And I do think, last season we saw a real drastic dip in his deep passing ability. He was one of the best in terms of deep passes in his 2019 season at LSU. And good Lord, that changed very significantly in the 2020 season. The only players with worse adjusted completion percentage on deep pass attempts, so that's 20 plus yards, it's Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins.
Oh, yikes. I bet y'all didn't see that coming today. No Dwayne Haskins drops on the AFC North preview. We didn't get to there. He's QB 13, by the way, in ECR, Joe Burrow. Tags, you've talked about Najee Harris a lot. Give me one sentence of why everybody should be drafting Najee Harris.
Stud.
Ooh, one word. Oh, look at you. Throwing it down. I love that. All right. I want to thank our guest here for giving us all of her time. You can follow her, of course, at FF BallBlast. She is Kate Magdziuk, again, editor, coordinator at DK Live, also contributor to the 2021 Fantasy Football Black Book in this very division preview series. So go check out her work there. Kate, what else you got going on? You're a busy lady and clearly high integrity, who is not going to pick a sleeper just to make me happy. No, refusing to do that. What's going on with you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, so you can check all of our work out over at BallBlastFootball.com. We've got the BallBlast Fantasy Football Podcast, always dropping some fun and interesting takes, trying to get you ahead of the curve. We don't need to go into too much craziness, but we're going to give you just enough bite to really spice up your fantasy leagues and get ahead of the curve. So we've got a lot of fun stuff going on over there. We've got a really cool writing staff too. Who are really entertaining and funny.
Yes,
so
you do.
Go check out their work, and definitely check out DK Live. Lots of good betting advice, information, all that good stuff.
They've got a great team of people over there. She's 100% right. Go check them out. Give them a follow if you don't. Subscribe to the shows. Great stuff there. Also, I want to thank our sponsors for today's show, Rain Sunglasses, RAEN.com. Again, promo code FantasyPros for 25% off. And don't forget about Pristine Auction as well. We've got that giveaway going on at FantasyPros.com/contest. Thanks to Pristine Auction. That's Stephon Diggs autographed jersey. But we've also got $5 we want to put in your hand, just like Grandma used to do, to go get yourself something nice at PristineAuction.com. That's PRISTINE.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel here at Fantasy Pros. It's very easy. I'd like to get up to 100,000 subscriptions for the YouTube channel before the kickoff of the season. I'm throwing that out there. Tags, you think we can do that with the people?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, 100,000. That's what we want to do. We're in the high 80s, I think, right now. Let's go. 100,000. We can do it. It's all about you. So we want to thank you for listening to the show. As always, I want to thank our guests for joining us. For Kate Magdziuk and Mike Tagliere, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.